Good morning, everyone. We'll start the session in another 3 more minutes. A very good morning, everyone. I, Ms. Neha S. Kairana, Assistant Professor at the Department of Management Studies, invite you all for this first session of the 5th day of FDP on the topic Higher Order Thinking. Positive thoughts and prayer have been the best means available since the beginning of time to transform darkness to light. Positive thinking can change you, but it won't change someone else. Whereas positive prayer can make a difference in someone else. May I now call upon my colleague, Ms. Renu from BHM Department to lead us in prayer.
Let's start the prayer. Good morning, everyone. Let's start the prayer. Ajam nirvikalpam nirakaram सारमेकं निरानन्दमानन्द अद्वैतपूर्णं परं निर्गुणं निर्विशेषं निरीहं परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेमा जगत्कारणं कारणं ज्ञानरूपं सुरादिं सुखादिं गणेशं गणेशं जगद्व्यापिनं विश्ववन्दं सुरेशं परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेमा गुणातीतमानं चिदानन्दरूपं चिदाभासकं सर्वगम्यानगम्यं मुनिद्धे महाकाश रूपं परेशं परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेमा परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेमा परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेमा. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renu ma'am, for enlightening us with a prayer song. Albert Einstein quoted saying, "Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of mind to think." Thinking than that which created them. With this thought, let me now invite our HOD, Dr. Lakshmi SR, to give the welcome speech. Over to you, Lakshmi ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Sneha. Good morning, one and all present here. I feel honored to welcome our Principal, Sister Rosemary Balappa, Director, Dr. C. Karthikeyan, all HODs, faculties, and participants. I welcome all the eminent speakers and guests who have come here to share their knowledge and vast experience with all the participants on the last day of FDP program on technical pedagogy for empowering sustainable advances in higher education. Creation and dissemination of knowledge through technical pedagogy is one of the core functions of higher education institutions. Higher order thinking skill is a popular concept. It distinguishes critical thinking skills from low order learning outcomes such as those attained by rote memorization. Higher order thinking skills include synthesizing, analyzing, reasoning, comprehending, application, and evaluation. With the objective to enrich the knowledge of participants through this FDP, I wholeheartedly welcome you all to this program. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Neha.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi. I now request Ms. Densi, Assistant Professor, Department of Management Studies, to introduce the speaker for this session. Over to you, Ms. Densi.
Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. A very good morning to all. First of all, I thank our management, beloved Principal Sister Rosemary Balappa, IQAC Director Dr. Karthikeyan for supporting us to organize this program. On behalf of T. John College, I wholeheartedly welcome the resource person for the session, Ms. Ashwini. I thank her from the bottom of my heart for accepting our request and gracing this occasion. She is an intelligent and dynamic personality, contributing a lot to the society in various ways. Ms. Ashwini is the founder director of Mukta Foundation, which is an organization committed to prevent interpersonal violence and promote mental health. She was earlier a faculty member in postgraduate department of psychological counseling at Montfort College and Jain University, Bangalore. Being a counseling psychologist, she has practice and research interest in the area of intervention and prevention of interpersonal violence such as intimate partner violence, child abuse, bullying, etc. It gives me immense pleasure to inform you all that she has been recognized as one of the 100 leaders out of 30 from across the globe for her idea titled Focus Formula to Foster Mental Health in Low and Middle Income Countries at Switzerland. In the year 2019, she directed campaign titled Child Safety National Priority, where she traveled non-stop 90 days from January 1st to April 1st, 2019 to all the 29 states and 3 union territories to conduct over 150 training sessions on prevention of child sexual abuse, thereby becoming the first person to have done this consecutively in the country. She is currently leading an emotional distress helpline due to COVID-19 crisis launched by Mukta Foundation. With all due respect and honor to hear from you, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for such a warm welcome, ma'am. Just, for clarity, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Oh, fantastic. So thank you so much for having me over, especially for this topic of higher order thinking skills. So I've divided this in such a way that maybe the first 1 hour I'm going to present, and let's try and keep it interactive if it's possible. And then maybe we will take over questions if there are any. So just give me a second's time and I would begin to share the screen. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the first topic in this morning session that we have is higher order thinking. Now, there are several researchers who have talked about higher order thinking, but for the sake of this particular presentation, what I have chosen is Bloom's taxonomy. Many of you might have already heard of this particular concept, but today let's talk about how to systematically bring in what Bloom's taxonomy is proposing to our classes so that we can promote higher order thinking among our students. Now look at this. Now this image is going to be our guiding, the image for the next 1.5 hours. Now don't worry about the details that are presented on the screen, but I want you to right now focus on just the particular the pyramid that you see. This is called Bloom's taxonomy. Now the moment we are talking about higher order thinking, that means there is something that we also consider to be basic and lower order. Because the moment we say something is higher, by the very definition, we also consider there is something upon which this higher order thinking is built. Now look at that particular pyramid. How many stages do we have? We have 6 stages. Now this is something that's proposed by an American educational psychologist by name Benjamin Bloom. Now after his name, this particular hierarchy of thinking and learning has emerged. Now look at this. He says the most basic level of thinking is remembering. I'm sure all of you remember, even when I'm saying all of you remember, that means I'm asking you to recollect, isn't it? Now, whatever you know, when you recollect and then share it with who you're speaking or who you're interacting, now that's going to be the most basic level of thinking. Remember. Now remember, as you were kids, somebody would ask, what's your name? And then you would recollect. And then they would be like clapping and then saying, oh, this child remembers. Now you see, that means when the child is just beginning to learn to maybe talk or beginning to, the learn and recollect, we are asking for the most basic things. Or I'm sure all of you remember the times when somebody asked us, tell that rhyme. And then we did not understand those twinkle, twinkle, little stars and all that, what we were telling, but then we simply uttered those words. For all you know, a child, maybe a 3.5-year-old child, does not understand the meaning of the twinkling stars up above the world so high. The meaning may not be understood, but they are recollecting these sentences, recollecting the words that they have heard, and then presenting it. Now that's the basic level and forms the base, the foundation of the pyramid. And then we move on to the second concept, which is to understand. In understanding, we are looking at not just recollecting from our memory, but trying to present it maybe using our own words. Now we will just familiarize ourselves with these 6 terms. Later, the entire workshop is about how do we build these in our students, especially the higher order. Understanding means what? It's not about simply remembering what we know, but trying to explain. For instance, let's say slightly older kid, maybe around 6-7 years, they might have heard a story. They may not tell it exactly using the same words that they have heard from maybe a parent, whereas they're able to put it in their own words and then explain the story to you. That means what? The child has now moved one step up. From remember, they have now moved to understanding. That means they're understanding whatever was taught to them or whatever they have heard, and now they're presenting it in their own words with their own understanding. That's the next level. Now the third level. The third level is application, to apply. Now in apply, what we are looking at is whatever you know, you might have learnt about it in a particular context. Can you apply this learning in a newer context? Are you all, listening to me? What is apply? Apply means whatever you've remembered, whatever you've understood. Maybe we've understood that in one context, right? Can you apply the same learning to another context? Now you see, this is about solving newer problems, implementing what we know in a different context. I'm sure, when we were young, we had all learnt about, the tortoise and the rabbit story. We have heard it, we remembered it, and then we've also explained it in our own words. Then that means the first levels of, the thinking is all right. Now application. Today, do you see how the same tortoise and the rabbit, the story is also applied in different contexts? Just looking at that story, we can apply to our life, maybe in our professional life, maybe in our personal life. Maybe if we are working in a corporate sector, we can look at how the competition, some of us are like rabbits, some of us are slow and steady. Now the application is immense. Now when we are encouraging our students to look at whatever you've learned, can you apply it to a new context? That means what? We are moving from the lower order thinking to one step higher. I hope all of you are listening. Now after application, look at the fourth level. Analysis. Analyze. What does analyze mean? Whatever we know, let's say a student has learned something in the first year, and now the student is learning something in the second or the third year. Now, can the student connect the past learning with the present one and understand what are the incremental changes that is emerging in their own learning? So analysis is all about, drawing conclusions, drawing connections between ideas. That means what? We are not just dealing with what we have learned now. Instead, when we are analyzing, we are also bringing in our past learning and then reflecting on the past and the present learning together. That means there is also an inference about the past in the context of what we have learned at present. So let's say, those of you who might be familiar with psychological, the theories. Let's say in the first year, a student has learned something about psychoanalysis. It's a theory proposed by, this is considered the father of, psychology, psychoanalysis, by name Sigmund Freud. Let's say in the first year, a student has learned the theory that's proposed by Sigmund Freud. That was in first year. Now to analyze means, now in the third year, maybe the student is learning about so many other theories. To analyze means, as I am learning something new, I bring in my past learning and then maybe compare my previous learning with the present learning and identify the strengths of the previous theory or the limitations of the previous theory and so on. So analysis means what? We are connecting what we have learned in the past to the present, and we are connecting multiple concepts and then trying to make sense of everything together. So you see, analysis is certainly more advanced than the previous levels, isn't it? Now let's move on to the fifth, the level. The fifth level is evaluation. What does evaluation means? Evaluation means we are looking at how do we justify, how do we make a decision regarding something that we have learned. That is evaluation. Sometimes, you can give your students certain sentence and then ask them to justify it, or we can ask them to criticize a particular theory. Now, all of this is certainly more than remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing. In evaluating, we believe that I have gained a thorough understanding of this particular concept. That means I'm also in a position to make my own independent comments on it. See, in analysis, we were only looking at comparing, contrasting, connecting what I have learned in the past with the present. Whereas in evaluating, our understanding is so thorough that we believe that because I have learned, I can actually criticize it. I can say this is what is best about what I have learned. I think these are the limitations. So you see, we are bringing in our own independent perspective on what we have learned. That's evaluation. Then look at what's at the top of the pyramid. What's at the top of the pyramid? Create. You see, the first five, the thinking, was all about learning and then appraising what we have learned. Whereas what is at the top of Bloom's taxonomy is, can you create new knowledge? Can you contribute to the existing knowledge fund? Can you produce something new and original work? And we all recognize nothing original can ever be created without knowing what has already existed. No? So therefore, I want you to remember, as we move upwards on this particular pyramid, we need to acknowledge the contribution of the previous skills. You cannot understand without remembering. You cannot apply without understanding. You cannot analyze without having the knowledge of application. You cannot evaluate without having knowing how to analyze, and you can certainly not create something new and original without having evaluated your past learning or the past knowledge that is already there. Therefore, I want you to think, the topic the FDP is focusing on higher education. Given the very focus of the FDP is higher education, our focus should also be on higher order thinking, isn't it? So therefore, today let's focus on how do we build all of these with a special focus on evaluation and creation. Okay. Now, just for the clarity's sake, just for you to understand from which point onwards are we considering something to be a higher order thinking. Look at this. The first two, remembering and understanding, are considered basic thinking skills. Basic skills. Which are the basic skills? Remembering and understanding are considered basic skills. Application and analyzing, that is considered to be complex skills. That means it's slightly more complex than the first two. Apply and analyze, these are considered complex skills. Whereas evaluation and creation are considered higher thinking skills. But for us to be able to build in higher thinking skills, the foundations must be strong. The foundations have to be strong. Sometimes, even at master's level, I want you to all, keep thinking and reflecting what I'm saying. Even at master's level, sometimes we ask a student, define something. So the moment we are saying define something, that means what? We are asking the child to simply recollect, not the child, the student to simply recollect and tell us what they know. Which order thinking would that be? Would anybody like to unmute and tell? The moment we say simply define something for 2 marks, sometimes we give it, right? Define, let's say define psychoanalysis or define learning. Which level is that?
It is just the first level, I feel, ma'am.
Absolutely. It is just the first level. So that means what? A student has reached a master's level, whereas we are still asking the student to perform the most basic of all thinking functions, which is recollecting. So I want you to really take this up seriously, because as we are taking our students from, let's say, PUC to undergraduation and then post-graduation, we as faculty members, we need to make conscious efforts to ensure they are at least in the 4th level and above. We need to make that effort, because as remembering, understanding was good for, kindergarten students were asked to remember, right? Tell me, what do you know? Tell me that rhyme. And then in middle school, maybe understanding and application. In high school, application and analysis. In entry level college, analysis and evaluation. But then as a student reaches post-graduation or even undergraduation, the focus has to be on building higher order thinking. In fact, at every level of education, we need to be promoting in our children, in our students these, but especially in higher education, the focus must be on evaluation and creation. Now think about it. Why is somebody awarded a doctorate, PhD? PhD, why? After presenting your PhD thesis, somebody calls us a doctor. Why? Because the idea is, through your PhD thesis, which level of thinking have we reached? Or it's the manifestation of which level of thinking? Submitting a PhD thesis means what? Can somebody unmute and say? Or you can also put it on the chat mode. Not sure if I have access to it. See, a PhD thesis means you've evaluated the existing knowledge fund. Isn't it? All our review of literature that we do, it is to analyze and then evaluate that, okay, this is what the existing knowledge is. Now, through my research, I'm going to create new and original work. Because we have created new and original work through our thesis, that is considered one of the highest level of education, isn't it? So therefore, all our UG and PG degrees must empower our students to get to a position where they evaluate what is already existing, and we need to prepare them to create something new and original. I hope all of you have understood just the outline of Bloom's taxonomy. Now I'm going to further elaborate on all of this. I'm going to say, if you ask this question to a student, this is the level that we are tapping into. I'm going to explain it that way. But so far, is there clarity? If you let me know whether there is clarity, I'll move on to the next topic then. Is there clarity, everyone? Yes, no? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes and then I'm moving on. Yeah, there was some concern with the slide. Let me just see. I'm unable to change the slides. No, for some reason I'm not able to. Just give me a second. I think there has to be a way to address this. Is there anybody can help me as to how we could change the slides? I'm unable.
1 second, ma'am.
Yeah, it's frozen, ma'am.
Nagraj sir, just helping us out. 1 second, ma'am.
Sure, definitely, no problem.
Ma'am, share it once again, ma'am.
1 second, sir.
Yeah, please.
I was okay. No, for some reason.
Meanwhile, in case if anybody has any queries, please put it on the chat box
Yeah, that's
so that we can address it later.
okay. I wonder why. If you're okay, I can also just continue without the slides. Would that be okay? Because I don't know, for some reason it is.
Ma'am, it's absolutely no problem, ma'am.
Okay, sure, ma'am. Okay, so far is there clarity on this particular topic? I've done something. I hope it works. Now, are you all able to see a new slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Fine then. So now I've given you all an introduction to Bloom's taxonomy, using which we are going to talk about higher order thinking. Now, as I've already mentioned, it was an American educational psychologist by name Benjamin Bloom who popularized this particular idea. And he was the one who classified thinking into, there is something called lower order and higher order. Now, from my understanding, we consider analysis and above as higher order thinking. The first three, right? Remembering, understanding, and what was the third one? Application. They're considered lower order, whereas the analysis, evaluation, and creating is considered higher order. But the other way to understand the classification is the first two levels are considered as basic skills. The third and the fourth one are considered complex skills. The fifth and the sixth one are considered as higher order thinking. Yeah, sometimes in literature, right, higher order thinking skill is usually considered as HOTS, H-O-T-S. That is the acronym that people use in order to describe higher order thinking skill. Now, this was actually first proposed as early as 1950s, but we see that even today there is a tremendous application of what we are talking as higher order thinking. Now, as I've already mentioned, we can classify the thinking skills into basic thinking skills, complex thinking skills, and then we have higher order thinking skills. Now, let's move on. Now, what we will do is we are going to look at each level of thinking and then going to elaborate further. Look at the first level. You're already aware of this. Remembering. In remembering, the goal is to encourage the student to exhibit memory of the previous learning. It's just the memory, not even the understanding of the previous learning. It's only the memory of the previous learning. Sometimes you might have observed certain students, they might have memorized something. And then the moment they forget one word in that particular sentence, right, they cannot move any further. Let's say the child is like, na, 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 and then one word is forgotten. And then they don't know how to move further. That means what? They are simply recollecting that from memory. And one particular link is gone, then the whole chain gets derailed. That is what happens when we are trying to recollect something without understanding. Now, look at this. What are some of the questions when we ask? it's going to tap into this particular level of thinking. Sometimes choose, when we begin the sentence with choose, let's say we give them options and then we are like, okay, choose the theory that was proposed by a particular person, and then we are giving them multiple options. Now, this multiple options, what they are doing? Choose the right answer. Choose the theory that is proposed by a particular person. Now, all that they are doing is they are recollecting from their memory which one and then ticking. So whenever we use the word choose, sometimes it is tapping into the remembering aspect. And like I've already mentioned, define, find, how. Whenever we ask how, maybe the student just recollects, or we say list, match the following, name, omit. Omit is, I'm sure all of you remember, maybe you still have these questions in your exam. Or omit is choose the odd one out. Omit this. Recall, select, spell. Whenever we ask a student spell this, it's only from memory, right? Tell, what, when, where, which, who. These are all like facts, no? All that we are checking is facts. Or when we say repeat after me. Now, if I ask you, okay, I'm going to tell all the 6 levels, you please repeat after me. That means what? You can only repeat after you remember. So whenever we are using any of these, right, we are only functioning from the remembering. And remembering level is what? The most basic level. Can you give me one example? One example for remembering based on the question paper that you set, and then I'll move on to, the next level. Who would like to give me one example of a question which clearly is tapping into the remembering skill? And use the words that I've already provided. Choose, define, list, omit, what, when, where, which, who. It's not why, but then you see what, when, where, which, who. These are all facts. Why would require a certain reasoning. Yes. Would somebody like to tell me a question? Now, this is too much of pin drop silence in the group, huh?
Ashwini ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, as a management faculty, the
Okay.
basic question that we ask to students is, what are the 14 principles, Henry Fayol's 14 principles?
Okay.
So, what you said is absolutely right. Because when we say Henry Fayol's 14 principles, as a teacher, I will not expect anything apart from those 14 principles which he had told
Yes. So thank you so
centuries
much.
ago.
Yeah, thank you so
But
much
then-
for that. Huh.
So, but then when a student is writing, he is expected to only mug up things and then
Yes.
write exactly what is being told by Henry Fayol.
Look at that. So now, like Maham said, we are asking for 14 principles. We are asking for 14 principles. And you see, when we're asking for 14 principles and we don't want the word to go here and there, and it should be exactly like how the theorist has proposed, we are only tapping into the remembering. Which is important, but in a question paper there must also be other questions which are tapping into the higher skill. Sometimes it's quite possible that the student has not understood these 14 principles, but then the student simply knows how the words are put and they write and then they get the excellent marks. So what I want you to please remember is, remembering alone is not a proof for having understood. Thanks for that particular example, ma'am. So 14 principles, we cannot say 14 principles they know or they have understood. All that we can say is they remember the 14 principles in the manner that the words were put by the theorist. So that is only the basic level. Now let's move on to the second level. Look at the second level. Now, the second level, we are going beyond remembering to understanding. Here, we are asking them to explain the ideas or concepts. Now, just taking the same example that ma'am gave. Ma'am, what was your name? I'm unable to see the names of the participant. What was your name, ma'am?
Ma'am, my name is Neha.
Sneha, ma'am. So like Sneha ma'am was, giving us an example of the 14 principles in management. That was remembering. When we say state 14 principles, that means, or list 14 principles, that was level 1. Now, the moment we move on to understanding level, can you change the question? We could at least say, explain these 14 principles using your own words. You see, the moment we are saying your own words, that means a student must put across their understanding in words. This is actually much better than put it exactly like the way that particular theorist has said. Of course, that's important. But then as we move higher and higher, our independent thinking must become sharper and sharper. So in understanding, what do we say? Classify, compare, contrast, demonstrate. We could ask, demonstrate your understanding of, not recollect, demonstrate your understanding of the 14 principles in management using your own words. Or explain, extend. Extend means what? Elaborate. At least elaboration is any day better than just those lines, no? When a student is asked to elaborate, they need to also bring in their own ideas and then elaborate. So that is better, and that is, encouraging them to move one step above, the thinking order. Then illustrate. What does illustration mean? Sometimes I have noticed you ask illustrate, you ask elucidate, you ask compare, contrast. The student is only giving us the list. And then we also end up giving students marks. We shouldn't. Because when we are asking them to analyze, why should they recollect? In fact, if given a chance, we need to give them no marks because the question was an analysis, not recollection. What does illustration mean? Teachers who are on the, the panel today, what does illustrate mean? The word illustrate mean. What does illustration mean? Illustration is certainly not explanation. Explanation is different. What does illustrate mean? Illustrate means that using examples can you describe. There is a difference, right? They can explain the 14 principles. That is also understanding. But another dimension of understanding is, can you explain these principles by using examples? Now you see, this is not memory, recollection. It is one step higher. Or we could also say outline, rephrase, summarize, translate. Now all of this are one step up. Understanding. Imagine when we are telling rephrase or paraphrase, what we are telling is, you understood. I know that you remember the 14 principles. Now put it in a succinct manner. Put it in an abridged version. Because a person can only abridge it. Abridge means what? Condense it. Or the person can elaborate it only if they have understood. If they have not understood, they can only recollect word to word right. So therefore, please ensure our question papers are, a good combination of all these questions. If you ask me, a question paper for UG and PG must always be analysis and above. That means 4th and above, or maybe once in a while third level, application, analysis, evaluation and creation. But okay, 2 markers can be remembering and understanding, but as the marks increases, can we please go higher order? Are you all okay with understanding? Did you all understand the second level of thinking skills? Understanding. Classify, compare, contrast, demonstrate, explain, describe, elaborate, illustrate. Illustrate means examples. So the next time you ask a student to illustrate, they simply explain without an example, then you cannot be giving marks. Now the promise that I want from all the faculty who are on this particular program is, at the beginning of the academic year, can you spend 1 hour, 2 hours just explaining what these words mean? Meaning, you need to explain to a student, what does illustration mean? What does describe mean? What does compare and contrast mean? What does differentiate mean? What does summarize mean? Outline mean? Elucidate mean? These are important so that we are all on the same page. Sometimes, in certain colleges that I've conducted programs, I've even created like forums where 1 hour teachers sit together and brainstorm on their definitions of these words. For somebody, compare means maybe they're going to compare similarities and differences. Okay, compare means. Whereas contrast means what? In contrast, we cannot be focusing so much on the similarities. Instead, we need to focus on the differentiation. You see, between the word compare and the word contrast itself, there is a difference. And students and teachers must be on the same page. And for that to happen, I would strongly recommend put all these words on the board and elicit students' opinions as to what does this mean. Ask them, what does illustration mean? What does hypothesize mean? What does demonstrate mean? How will you demonstrate your understanding? What does comparison mean? What does compare and contrast mean? 1.5 hours is good to at least understand each one of these concepts, so that students think, array, my teacher is not just looking at memory, he or she is looking beyond memory, beyond mere understanding. Then they will also learn that particular way. Okay, I hope there is clarity with the first 2 levels. Let's move on to the third level. The third level is application. What does application mean? Previously, we remembered, we understood. Now, whatever you understood, can you apply it to a new context? Can you apply it to a new context? Now, Sneha ma'am, you mentioned about that particular 14 principles, no ma'am? The theorist, which country is he coming from? See, I'm not from management background, I'm from psychology background, so I'm asking these questions. Which country is he from?
If I'm not wrong, ma'am, he is from France.
He is from France. Now, everything said and done, everything said and done, the cultural influence, on a theorist in developing any particular knowledge cannot be ruled out. No.
True, ma'am.
Now,
True,
can you come up with a particular application-based question, ma'am, for the same principles?
Normally, when we go for the
Yes, ma'am.
questions which has higher marks, say for example 14 marks,
Okay.
what I plan doing is I request the students, I say, out of 14 principles of Henry Fayol, which 6 principles would you implement in your organization to make sure that there is proper team building amongst the employees?
Okay.
So the students, anyways, they have to remember all the 14 principles.
Correct.
But I'm not asking them to write or replicate the same thing. But
Sure.
instead, I'm asking them, out of 14 principles, use the 6 principles and then tell how exactly you can use these 6 principles to bring about team building in the organization. And one more thing, ma'am.
Okay.
What I ask them is, I say, imagining you as a manager.
Ah.
That means they have to imagine themselves as a manager and then bring about these principles.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sneha ma'am. So now you see, in that particular, the question that Sneha ma'am just shared, there were so many applications, no? One, here is a student, but then we are encouraging the student to imagine as if he or she has become a manager now. That is better than remembering and understanding. It's one step up. Remember, what is application? Application means whatever you know, can you apply it in a new context and in a different way? Now, the student has learned in the classroom, but when ma'am is asking the student to imagine like a manager, now the theorist, the researcher is coming from France, whereas the student is here in India. And in India and France, the COVID management is different. So therefore, we could further ask a question such as, apply any 6 principles, in the present context in India, within the context of the pandemic. I'm sure the application is going to be different, no? So therefore, look at the words that we could be using for application-based questions. Apply, build, we could say build a plan. Or we could say choose. In fact, what Sneha ma'am said was choose, no? There are 14 principles, but then you choose You pick and choose any 6 that you think is most relevant to your team that you will be leading in India under the COVID context where maybe employees are not even meeting each other. It should be all online. Or construct, develop, experiment with, identify the best plan, make use of, model, illustrate, organize, plan, select, solve, utilize. You see, all of these words are tapping into the application. When we use the word utilize, we could say utilize all your understanding from all the theories and then come up with a plan that best works in the COVID management situation. Something on those lines. That means we're not looking at remembering and understanding. We are looking at whatever you know, pick and choose, utilize your understanding and then apply it to a newer context. See, my request to all of you is I would strongly recommend if you're faculty members in UG and PG, this must be the basic level. That means in the class itself, you need to have clarity whether they have understood in the class, and in the exam, let it be application. Now, sometimes I'm aware of some faculty members when they give assignments, they will simply give a topic. This topic you write. Now, whenever we give simple topic and we say write on this, that means we're only looking at understanding. They may go refer to some books and then they're simply maybe paraphrasing and writing it in the form of an assignment. But that was level 2, no? Instead, can we give a topic and then ask them to write an assignment on the applications of this topic? That means we have at least taken them to one step above. Now, any of you who are giving assignments or group presentations only on present on a topic. Now, this present on any topic is only remembering and understanding. We need to give group presentations and assignments wherein we say this is your topic and the focus must be on application. 10 minutes you explain your understanding, but after that another 1 hour has to be application. We need to make that very, very clear in UG and PG. I hope there is clarity on the third level of, which is the application. Now let's move on to analyzing. What does analyzing mean? Analyzing means drawing connections between ideas. Sometimes we notice how students, I'm sure you've heard this or maybe we ourselves have experienced this. Sometimes students say, I wrote that exam and then I forgot everything that I have learned. Holiday came and then I forgot. What does that mean? They themselves are telling in a manner that's very clear that I was only working from the memory point of view. Yesterday night I read and today I wrote and then I'm done. That means they are stuck at level 1 only. Analysis means what we know previously to what we know today. We are making connections. See, sometimes, students will ask, syllabus. This is this semester's syllabus, okay? A student must tell it's out of syllabus if at all we are giving the 6th semester subject in 4th semester. But if we are asking a student what was learnt in 1st semester, they cannot tell it is out of syllabus. Yes or no? Are you all listening to me? Here is a student in 4th semester. If at all a teacher gives some question from the 6th semester one, they can tell it's out of syllabus. But if a teacher is asking what was taught in the 1st semester, should the student say it is out of syllabus? No, right? Because the understanding is you've moved from 1st semester and then come to 4th semester. That means whatever you're learning in the 4th semester, you need to be able to connect that with what you've learned in the 1st, 2nd and the 3rd semester. This is not at all a habit in most educational institutions. Say, for example, say I'm unable to see your names. Let's say there is Dr. Jency. Now, Dr. Jency is teaching 3rd semester. Okay. Now, at least there must be 10% of questions which are from the 1st semester. This is to say, is the student who is now in the 3rd semester able to make logical connections between what was learned in the first and the third. Now, Dr. Jensi therefore must do what? Have questions which are going to connect the past learning to the present learning. The assignments could be something like, okay, make an analysis of all the incremental learnings that you've had across semester. What is happening mostly in our educational system is we are looking at compartmentalizing knowledge. Instead, knowledge as a whole is one entity, no? If we have to promote analyzing tendency, that means we need to keep bringing in the previously learned, understanding to today's. And even in the question paper, you need to have such questions. Fourth semester, this is the syllabus. But third semester one is not out of the syllabus. Instead, you need to draw that understanding and then be able to look at it in your present understanding. Can we at least have one question? You explain to students that this is going to happen. Of course, it's stressful because that's not how we were built, throughout our education, the span that we've had. But then that's important. Analyzing means what? Bringing in the past to the present and then making connections. So from time to time, even in the class, you need to keep asking them, analyze this theory from what you had learned previously, categorize, how would you classify these information, how would you conclude which one is better, distinguish, what do you think is the motive for us to introduce this topic in this semester and whatever you have learned in the past in the earlier semester, what is the motive? We always bring in topics chronologically, right? History we begin. Why do we start with history? So that we know the foundations and then we move on. There is nothing wrong in our, sometimes I have asked questions in the question paper. You explain the logic of our syllabus itself. Sometimes students are like, what question is that? But these are very important questions. Why did we put some topics in the first semester? Explain the logic of our very syllabus. What could be the reason that we learned cognitive behavioral therapy first and then we are learning solution focused approach now? Going beyond recollection would want us to have questions such as this. Sometimes you see, simplify. Whatever was presented to you with complexity in a textbook, can you simplify and explain? They say, the genius is somebody who can make something complex simple. Can we give that opportunity for students to do that? That theorist explained it like that. Can you simplify it and as if you're explaining it to a 5th standard kid? We need to do that, and that would truly reflect how much they have understood and how much they can analyze and then put things in a simple manner. Then we can also ask them to do thematic analysis. All the theories that you've learned, can you thematically categorize them? Something on those lines, but analysis would constantly include juggling between concepts. Looking at one concept and saying, okay, this is what I've learned now, this is what I'm learning, what are the similarities, what are the differences, why did the second one even come about? All of this is very, very important in order to promote higher order thinking. Is everyone okay so far? Am I too fast? Am I too slow? Is everything okay? You need to tell me. This is a group which is, I hope you're reflecting, but it would be wonderful if you could also interact.
It's perfect speed, ma'am.
Okay.
Because I'm getting the response from my colleagues.
Okay.
And they are understanding the concept.
Wonderful. So far, we've learned about the first 4, the thinking levels. Which one were those? Remembering, understanding, application, and analyzing. Now let's move on to evaluating. What does evaluation mean? Evaluation means we are looking at the pros and the cons, justifying and defending our opinions by making judgments about information, the validity of ideas, and even the quality of work. A lot of times, students think that particular theorist, nobody can challenge because that's why it's printed in the textbook. If that is the assumption, then no new knowledge could have ever emerged, no? So students must be given that confidence that after you understood, after you built that confidence in you to apply, and after you also compared and contrasted, what all you've learned by analyzing, you're now in a position to make independent opinions about what you've learned. Let's say in the domain of psychology, right? Sometimes we learn about 30 different, let's say therapeutic approaches. That means in counseling, what are all the different approaches we could use? Now, after we have learned it thoroughly, evaluating means you're asking, okay, for my interest, for this client, okay, this is the approach that is going to be best suited. Now you see, like a buffet, no? Like a buffet, you have almost like 30 different varieties of dishes. To evaluate means to think, okay, now it's night. Okay, night, and in the afternoon I had eaten this high on carbs. So now let me eat something in protein. That means you're making like an independent, you're forming an independent opinion and making an independent decision about what you've learned. All right. And you're saying, okay, this is a better idea. This is a not so better idea. It's not for me. You see, now we are now encouraging independent thinking in UG and PG. This has to be the focus. So what are some of the words? Appraise. Appraise means evaluate, no? Assess. Award. How does award mean? Let's say we say of all the 14 principles, according to you, which is the best, and award it the merit it deserves. Now, nothing right and wrong, but then the student must justify why did they arrive at that particular conclusion. Choose, compare, decide, deduct, defend. Defend means what? You give them a line and you say you need to defend it, whether you agree or not, but think unlike how you generally think. See, I remember reading this, Socrates, I think he said, a mature mind means a mature mind will neither accept anything readily nor reject anything readily. Ideas. A mature mind will not accept an idea quickly nor reject the idea quickly. Instead, it's going to entertain the idea in the mind. Isn't it beautiful? Now, when we are telling a child, when we are telling a student, okay, you evaluate, and sometimes we can even say you need to debate for the topic. You need to debate against the topic. That means maybe you're against it. That's fine. But I'm asking you to think otherwise. Now you debate as if you are for it. Let us promote an alternative viewpoint in your own mind. This is a world where tolerance has hit an all-time low, no? Why? Because we can only think from our perspective. Now, when we are asking a student to think from other perspective also, we are asking a student, you have your thinking, that's fine. You keep that aside. For a moment, you also think like somebody else. Think from the other perspective. Imagine, it's not just these thinking, higher order thinking skills are not just for academic purpose. It's actually for life. Think about it. Then we could also have influence. Influence means you persuade. You persuade the reader to think like you. Earlier I said we are asking the student to think unlike how they usually think. But then evaluating could also be, we say, now you need to convince the reader that this is the best theory. Justify, prove, prioritize, recommend, select, support, value. All of this would require them to have a thorough understanding. That's the basic. And then they're applying it in different contexts. They're analyzing it. And then they're saying, I applied, I analyzed, and then I think this is the best. This, I think, comes the second best. You see how improved and how higher order thinking develops when we are promoting this way of thinking. Sometimes you could even make students mandatorily ask questions. Sometimes they cannot, let's say, speak out loud. We can also ask them, you write questions and give. Then they are going to evaluate. No, they're going to sometimes criticize. They're going to sometimes critique. Now, as I have already mentioned, a student must be aware of what are the meanings of all these terms. Now, I want you to tell me, what's the difference between critiquing and criticizing? What's the difference between critiquing, criticizing? Who would like to go? Who would like to say? We say, critique. We say, critique this theory. Fine. Criticize this theory. What are the difference? Teachers, come on. What are the difference?
Ma'am, critic is some analysis
Okay. Okay.
and adding their view to that particular concept or something like that.
Okay.
How we have the film critics, so they share their opinion, analyze that what is good and what is not good.
Good.
So how the directors receive that. So that
Sure.
is critiquing.
Okay.
And then criticizing is something negative or putting somebody or something down.
Wonderful. Yeah. So what's your name, sir?
I'm Arun Kumar, ma'am.
Okay. Like Arun Kumar sir said, critiquing and criticizing, there are subtler differences. No? In critiquing, we are focusing both on the pros and the cons. Whereas in the criticizing, the focus is more on the limitations. In critiquing, C-R-I-T-I-Q-U-E, in critiquing, the focus is both on talking about the merits and the demerits, whereas criticizing, its focus only predominantly on the demerits. Now you see, a student must have clarity on this. And when you set a question paper of critiquing, if they have only criticized, that means they can only get half the marks, no? So think about it. So let us have clarity as teachers and let us also give in clarity to students so that our expectations are clear. Now let's move on to the sixth one, which is the highest level, creating. So far, in remembering, we simply recollected. In understanding, in our own ways, we understood what others had created. In application, what others had created, the learning, we applied it to a newer context. In analysis, what did we do? All that I have learned, I tried and then understood the connections and differences. In evaluating, what did we do? After analyzing all that I have learned, I made independent opinions. I formed independent opinions and, I made independent decisions. But till the fifth level, we are only using what others have created as knowledge. Yes or no? Whatever others have created, theorists, researchers, our teachers have created, I use that. But in the sixth level, I am creating newer knowledge and I am contributing to the knowledge fund. Here the focus is on producing new work, and any new work is created by compiling information together of the past only. Even if not anything, at least I need to know ABCD to come up with the newer ways of telling something. So anything we create new today is based on an older understanding. So, but in this level, I'm adding something new. I'm creating alternative solutions. Here, what should be the words? Adapt, build, change, combine, compose, construct, create. You delete. What do you think is unnecessary? You delete in that theory and justify why you did what you did. Design, develop, elaborate, formulate, imagine. See, in most PG today, they're having a minor research project. Minor research projects are actually because we want to promote this tendency in them. Now we are doing, so many projects, but then let us have clarity as to which level of thinking is it tapping. Because I know this is not to criticize anything, but then I am aware of few colleges where the research project is review of literature. Is that creation? No. If anything, that was analysis. If anything, that was evaluation. When you say write a paper and publish and let it be based on review of literature, paper got created, fine. But that paper was no new creation. No, it was only synthesizing an older understanding. So whenever you are asking students to publish a paper based on review of literature, that means what? They were only at the fourth and the fifth level, not the sixth level. No. Formulate, imagine, improve, invent, make up, maximize, modify, create something original, plan, predict, propose, solve, test. All of these are the kind of questions we could be asking our students so that we tap into their creating ability. Are you all okay? Is there anybody who would like to give me examples of the kind of assignments you've given which tapped into creating? See, sometimes, no, I mean, this happens in schools and colleges. We will say, be creative in your presentation. Okay. The moment we say be creative in your presentation, sometimes we see students, whatever they can present on PPT, they'll put certain colors on, the chart, and then they are presenting. That is not creativity. Creativity in presentation is not creativity in content. Have you seen students? They'll they will decorate the chart papers and then they will present. And that is their definition of creativity. No. When we are telling creative, be creative in your presentation, it's not how well you decorate the slides or how well you decorate those chart papers and then put it on the wall. Instead, creativity here is how will you challenge the existing theories? How will you elaborate it in such a way that the theory itself is now improving? We might be right or wrong, but that confidence must come in students to say, I've understood it and now I'm forming independent opinions and then I'm challenging this particular assumption. Now we need to give that particular confidence. Now that's the 6th level of Bloom's taxonomy. Is there clarity? Is there any questions that you wish to ask right now? Okay, I'm going to take that as, permission for me to move on. So far, what have we learned? We have learned 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and my request to all of you is you need to ensure our UG, PG students are 3rd level and above. Definitely they should be in evaluation and above, but let's start with 3rd level and above. Application, analyzing, evaluating and creating. I hope there is clarity regarding Bloom's taxonomy. Now, the next 10 minutes, I wish to, continue with few other topics and then, we could take questions. Now, quickly, there are 3 forms of thinking. There are 3 forms of thinking, learning. The first one is declarative learning. Declarative learning means it builds knowledge and often grows through reading, studies, discussion, formal coursework. These are all declarative learning. That means mostly theoretical in nature. Then there is something called procedural learning. Procedural learning means application of knowledge through experience and supervision. Here we are actually trying to build skills. But there is also one type of learning sometimes we neglect, and now this type of learning is most important in order to build higher level thinking, which is reflective thinking. Reflective thinking means this refers to thinking about what one is doing in order to learn from it. Are you all, I'm sure maybe that topic got covered in the faculty development program called metacognition. Who would like to tell what is metacognition in simple words? Is there anyone who would like to say what is metacognition? Meta means what? Metacognition. Simply put, metacognition is thinking about our own thinking. Similarly, in reflective learning, we are saying you need to think about what you're doing, what you're learning. Reflective learning is sometimes so much more important. So, in order to promote higher order thinking, we need to equally emphasize on reflective learning just as much as we generally focus on declarative and procedural learning. Are you all okay with this? Will you all remember 3 forms of learning? Declarative learning is largely theoretical, facts. Procedural learning is more or less skill-based because we're looking at application of what we've learned in declarative learning. But reflective learning is taking a step back and saying, thinking about what am I doing? What am I learning? It's almost like I think about the way I'm thinking. That's equally important because that's the reason why it's called metacognition. Thinking about the way you're thinking. Isn't it important? Thinking that array, I'm only analyzing, I'm not creating. Thinking that array, I'm only remembering, I'm not applying. See, that level of understanding is very important. Are you all okay with this? Can I move on? Okay, my slides just got stuck once again. Just give me a second's time. You wonder, no, why slides? 1 second.
No problem, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. It's so kind of you. All right. Okay. I hope you'll be able to see now. Can you all see the slides?
Not yet, ma'am.
How about now, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So now I've talked to you about Bloom's taxonomy and I have talked to you about 3 forms of learning. Now I wanted to just look at this slide. See, we have teaching method and teaching strategy. Now when we say teaching method is what the teacher knows, the teacher is going to present. But now, in order to promote higher order thinking, just focusing on teaching method is not good enough. We need to focus on the teaching strategy itself. Now, in strategy, method is one component. Are you all listening to me? Teaching method is how we deliver in the class. Maybe we have excellent teaching methods, but teaching strategy means it's a combination of how do you relate? Look at what all I have written underneath. Relational strategy, learning strategy, delivery strategy, feedback strategy, evaluation strategy, influencing strategy. All of this put together is teaching strategy. Now, in order for you to promote higher order thinking, my belief is we need to pay attention to all of these strategies. Imagine, if at all I'm an autocratic teacher. What does autocratic teacher mean? Somebody who criticizes student. A student asks one questions and then we are like, oh, what question is that? If there is that tendency, will they analyze in our presence? Are you listening to me? The moment a student finds us a bit dictatorial in nature, they would only want to tell us what they remember, what they understood, done. They don't want to risk taking. They don't want to risk in front of you by analyzing what they have known. They don't want to apply what they have learned to a newer context. Why? Because they're afraid that if I make a mistake, my teacher can really, scold me. Because relational strategy is there is no strategy. The teacher is being dictatorial. You see, the way we relate to students are also indirectly contributing to whether they take risk. Please remember, lower order skills are easy, right? Whereas any higher order skill comes with a risk that we may be wrong. Remember, we come up with a hypothesis and the hypothesis can get rejected, no? If you're afraid to take that risk, then we will never venture into taking up any research. So therefore, you see, this is not, higher order thinking is not just the function of our cognition, it's also a function of our relation. Delivery strategy, feedback strategy, evaluation strategy. Another quick example. Now, in order to promote higher order thinking, we need to also have a feedback and an evaluation strategy. Meaning, let's say we asked for differentiate. Question was differentiate. The student did not differentiate, only recollected and wrote. The question was for 5 marks. The question was differentiate. The student gave explanation. Ideally, what should be the marks for 5? 1 maybe, because they explained. Chalo, we will get. But if the teacher gives 4.5 because it was nicely explained, now the student will never build differentiation skills, no? Because a student is like, okay, if I explain and write, my teacher is giving. Now you see, the moment you say differentiate and explanation has come, you need to cut marks. That is part of feedback and evaluation strategy, no? So therefore, it's a combination of all. You need to be very, very thorough and have a plan in place. To promote higher order thinking means you need to have thorough evaluation strategy and you should have made it clear to the students. All right. Now, I'm going to take 2 to 3 minutes in trying to speak about how certain systematic errors could be there in reasoning. See, in fact, usually nobody would speak of cognitive distortions topic while talking about higher order thinking, because cognitive distortions is something that we talk in the context of mental health disorders. But I feel it's very basic. It's very, very basic. Certain errors in the way we think only will not let us to engage in higher order thinking. Are you all listening to me? What does cognitive distortions mean? Cognitive distortions are errors in our thinking style. Because there are these errors in our thinking style, we may not engage in higher order thinking in the very first place. For example, overgeneralization. Overgeneralization means thinking using these words, always, never, all of them, none of them, to think that everything, look at the word, everything that is in the textbook cannot be criticized. It's an overgeneralization. If we do not criticize what's there in the textbook, that means what we learned in 1980s will still be learning in 2021. Some of us could be working with these errors in our thinking. Overgeneralization. I shall never be able to go beyond remembering all of them. Sometimes a student could think all the teachers are only asking us to explain. That means when they ask us to create plan, I will explain and they will give me marks. You see, all of them. None of the teachers will cut marks if at all. I simply explain even when they're asking me to illustrate. Some students could be having these errors in our thinking style. Or can you give me an example of how a teacher can have these errors and therefore they're not engaging in encouraging or engaging in higher order thinking? Can you give me an example? All the teachers are only engaging in the first two levels. Because we are thinking everybody is doing this, we are also ending up doing the same. With my regular teaching only, my students are getting jobs. Why should I improve? You see that? Always, never, all of them. When we think through these reasonings, no, we will stay stuck where we are. Students also stay stuck where they are. Overgeneralization, detect it. Sometimes we are mind reading. Students don't question. You see that questioning is at the base of higher order thinking. Only remembering and then understanding does not require you to question, but then the rest requires questioning. But so many times students don't question because they are mind reading teachers. Mind reading means what? If I ask too many questions, my teacher will think I'm trying to act too smart. Look at the word. Trying to act too smart is seen as not a desirable way of being a student. Being smart is a desirable thing, no? But then trying to act too smart, that means they're mind reading. So you need to calm them. You need to encourage them that no, it's desirable. Please ask questions. Don't mind read me. Don't mind read. Labeling. Some of them might have labeled themselves that I'm not smart enough to ask. I am as such dumb because I'm not getting good scores. They might have labeled themselves negatively. Some students and teachers also might think I'm not hardworking. 6 years back, I had made some notes, the same notes I'm giving my students. If I have labeled myself to be not hardworking, that means we don't even plan to encourage higher order thinking in students. No, so don't label yourself. Dichotomous thinking. Dichotomous thinking is the first 3 levels are easy. The next 3 levels are difficult. Dichotomous thinking means opposites. Polarized thinking. Putting one thing here, putting the other thing here. I am aware of some teachers who would say history can't be taught in higher order thinking. We cannot encourage. Other papers can be taught. Each one of us are thinking our paper we cannot do that. Other papers we can do that. That means what? We are creating opposites. Nothing like that. All papers, irrespective of which subject, language, maths, anything, we can certainly bring in higher order thinking. Can we please do that? Do not have black and white thinking. Dichotomous thinking is called black and white. Black and white means what? This is possible, this is not possible. There is nothing left. Or to think that my students in online classes promoting higher order thinking, no ways. If it was regular classes, I could have promoted. You see how we are putting things as opposites? Nothing. It is possible. Now, I've spoken about quite a few topics. Yeah, I've spoken about quite a lot of topics. I just want you to look at this because there are only 10 minutes. I want you to look at this. What do you think I'm trying to communicate using this iron box metaphor? Higher order thinking, all that is fine. But imagine that you as a teacher is the iron box and students are these clothes, different materials. What am I trying to communicate using this particular set of pictures? Teachers, what do you think I'm trying to communicate? We've learned about higher order thinking, how to promote it. I've also talked to you about errors in our thinking. And I've talked to you about 3 levels, 3 forms of learning. All that is fine. But why do you think I'm showing you this iron box and then different materials? And then I'm telling, relate something about the iron box to teacher and then about these different materials to students. Why? Think. Go ahead. Give it a try. Teachers, give it a try. Somebody has unmuted and that's making me. Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
What I just understand, ma'am,
Yes.
that these textile materials that you have shown
Okay.
are different characteristics of students.
Okay.
One can be very much absorbent in thoughts,
Okay.
like the third picture which you have shown there with the square marks.
Okay.
One is a little bit confused with the thoughts.
Sure.
This is only my understanding, ma'am. And
No.
one is ready to accept anything. So
Okay.
we as class teachers, or if we are into the faculty fraternity, what I feel is we have to polish not only our students' thoughts and make them absorb the thinking that we put into them. At the same time, we also have to polish our own self, because we can't go updated. We can't go unless until we are prepared. We can't say, as we rightly just now said, that people go with 6 years of notes, some old topics they take again and they go. But that's not the fair enough. We need to update ourselves. We need to be polished first. Then we get all the rights to polish any textile which has been given to us.
All. Very nice, ma'am. Ma'am, your name? I'm not able to see the names.
Neha, ma'am.
Sneha. Sneha, ma'am, I should have remembered your voice. You've spoken earlier. Now, thanks, Sneha, ma'am, for sharing your perspective. Now, like Sneha, ma'am said, I'm referring to different characteristics of students by these different texture. One iron box, and then the iron box is given that regulator of heat. We can regulate the heat. Let's say the woolen clothes, what heat we can put. Can I iron the silk with the same? No. So what I'm trying to say using this picture is, we as teachers are like iron box. Students come in various shapes and forms and texture like you see. Now each student may also be in one level of thinking. Somebody's strength could be understanding, somebody's strength could be applying, but then you as teacher, you need to regulate it. Ultimately, the aim is we have prepared all the students in such a way that they can go higher and higher. Because when students come to college, depending on in which school and what type of parenting they've had, maybe because of a particular type of schooling, maybe only remembering and understanding was promoted. For such a student, we cannot straight away go and give creativity. Creation, which is a 6th level. So instead, we need to make it step by step. Are you all okay? So this iron box metaphor is to encourage all of you to be aware of what is each student's level of thinking. From remembering, can we come to creating? very, very difficult. No, there is a reason why it's put in the form of a pyramid. So please be aware of it. Please be aware of it. Give additional training to these students if need be. Somebody who is already in that evaluating level, for that person, creating is good. Do not bring that person down to applying or understanding or, remembering. We need to always take our students higher up, but let's also acknowledge the individual differences that there could be in terms of which level they are in. Yeah, so be like the iron box which can regulate the heat. That means which can regulate the strategies that we use with each student, because let's face it, each student is more comfortable with different levels of thinking, but we have one goal, which is we need to take students higher and higher and higher. May not be from first to the sixth level, no, first to second, second to third, but we need to ensure they move higher and higher, and there we have a lot of role to play. So with this, I'll end my session. If there are questions, I would be able to take it. I hope you've learned Bloom's taxonomy, 3 forms of learning, cognitive distortion, but most importantly, you are in higher education. That means we need to ensure our students are at least in 4th, 5th, 6th level. So with this, I end my talk. Maybe if there are questions, I would like to take it. Are there any questions? Now quickly, remembering thing, what are the 6 levels? At least this should just, enter into your brains, and 10 years later, if I say levels, then you should be able to say what were the 6 levels. First one, remembering. Second one, understanding. Third one, applying. Fourth one, analyzing. Fifth one, evaluating. Finally, we have creating. So these 6 levels you remember, and then frame your question papers, organize your classes. All the very best to all of you, and T. John College, thank you so much for having me over. Thanks a lot.
Ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
As we have a session going on live on Teams as well as YouTube.
Okay.
So we have some questions. I'll be
Please.
taking it up, ma'am. Mary Churakal, she has asked a question. Who is the father of psychoanalysis?
Okay. So the father of psychoanalysis is a person by name Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud. We say Sigmund Freud, yes, right? You can like his theory, hate his theory, but there is no ignoring his theory. Every other theoretical perspective we have in the domain of psychology, at least where therapy is concerned, it's coming from Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory. Sigmund Freud, ma'am.
Wonderfully explained, ma'am. We have a second question on YouTube. Rajeshwari Shinde, ma'am. So she has asked what is law of demand, and her second question says, ask ma'am to explain with example illustrations. Ma'am, you have answered it throughout the session. Maybe before that ma'am had put the question, but then Ashwini ma'am has answered that illustration part of it.
Illustration simply means using examples. Any principle, you need to explain it using examples, then it becomes illustration. Or sometimes in engineering and all, illustration could also mean draw and show. So let's say there is a social theory. We could also ask, a student to illustrate using pictorial depiction. That's also one type of illustration. So there are multiple meanings to illustration, ma'am. Illustration could be examples, or it could also be illustrate using pictorial depiction. Now, pictorial depiction is, let's say, I could have talked about Bloom's taxonomy without that pyramid, no?
Yes.
That
yes.
pyramid in itself is an illustration because it's pictorially says it's in a order. Yeah.
So then, ma'am, we have good comments which has come to your session. Bhuvaneshwari ma'am says, Sangamesh Gobi, he says, sir says, very informative session, useful and motivational session. And Jagdish Bidarakoppa sir says it was a very good session. And I have received 2 questions on Microsoft Teams live. So I'll just put forward the question, ma'am. So this is asked by Gio sir. Okay. Connecting the various semester is a very good phenomenon, he says.
Okay.
And in this time of online education, is this practically possible?
See now, any new idea to begin with has to seem impractical, and only then can it be considered new. If any idea can be readily accepted, that means there is something, it's not as original as we think. Think about it, sir. When COVID happened in the first wave, we thought our semesters would just go for a toss. But somehow we learned Zoom, somehow we figured out the Microsoft Teams, we learned what is Cisco, WebEx, all that. And then we are improving day by day, improving day by day. So therefore, what seems not practical today, when we adapt to changes without much resistance, no, for all, it is possible. May not be ideal. It may not be ideally possible, but then we can still make it possible, provided there is that intent. When we understand the importance of it, we will make time. But the moment we understand the importance, we should not bring in perspectives such as it is impractical and then leave it there. You see that it's relevant, you see that it's important, then we will make at least 5 minutes to connect between semesters. So therefore, you're right, it seems not practical, but then think about it, all new ideas have to seem impractical. But then with your intent, I'm sure incrementally we can make it practical. Think about it.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Gio sir is listening to your answer. And one more question from Nagraj sir. Past learning and connecting it to present is not happening. Learning has become temporary. This question, I think, ma'am, many of us do have it in our mind that it is becoming more temporary as the classes are being online. So what is your thought on this, ma'am?
Yeah, so maybe it's becoming, I'm just thinking, ma'am, see, when I say lower order thinking, we are not making it seem like, array, that's so basic. Instead, that's fundamental. It's called basic because, not because it's any lightweight or anything, but it's foundational. So maybe more revision is needed. So therefore, from past learning to present learning, if students are not remembering, that means they are looking at learning only for the sake of the test. So instead, if we could promote a more positive attitude towards why they are learning, which is for life. Many students I've heard, they're like exams during COVID times is easy to manage. Whatever that sentence means, let's not get into the interpretations of it. But then 10 years down the line, if we say we are from COVID batch, no employer is going to be easy on us. So therefore, COVID or no COVID, online or regular learning is learning. So therefore, I think past and present needs to be connected, sir. That means the students' attitude regarding why they are learning needs to be understood and then addressed. They might be overgeneralizing, overgeneralizing that my learning is only for exam. If that is the case, after the moment they have written, they will forget. So if we value something, we will remember. If we don't value something, we will forget. That's the deal. So therefore, let us promote this learning for the joy of it, for the application of it, not for the exam that comes after the end of the semester.
Thank you, ma'am. Nagraj sir is happy with the answer. So actually, ma'am, listening to you as an eminent speaker, it's wonderful listening to you because the way you have put forward the Bloom's taxonomy. This taxonomy is a pyramid and it's a complicated version of understanding what it exactly says. So it was the way you have explained is beautiful. The way you have divided the session into basic, complex and higher order thinking. That was something very well explained. And as faculty fraternity, I'm very sure that most of us have got the clarity on what you meant on each of the levels. Now, when you are explaining also, what I personally felt is, it's not only the student learning, it's also we teachers learning to go from the remembering level of a student to the top level of creativity. So suddenly I was just going through and I remembered this Malala Yousafzai. So she just quotes saying, one child, one teacher, one book and one pen can change the world. This is exactly what you meant, that if we go along with this Bloom's taxonomy and we go against the ladder and then help the student to go from remember to create, it's a wonderful journey, not only for a student, ma'am, but also for a teacher. I'm really very happy that the way you have put it forward, and thank you for all your patience that you have put it forward in this, ma'am. Now I request our professor, Mr. Arun Kumar, Assistant Professor, the Department of Management Studies, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
A very good morning to all. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this event to all the dignitaries. I would like to thank our keynote speaker for the session, Dr. Ashwini NV, who is the founder director of Mukta Foundation, for giving her valuable thought and time for addressing the participants in the session on higher order thinking and sharing on her knowledge on areas like Bloom's taxonomy, explaining us about the different levels of understanding, different forms of learning, teaching strategies. Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to thank our respected chairman, sir, and administrator, sir, for encouraging and providing all support to organize this FDP. I would like to thank our beloved principal, IQAC director, staff members, and participants for making this FDP a grand success. Once again, I thank one and all present here. Thank you. Over to Sam.
Thank you, Arun sir. As quoted by Benjamin Franklin, if everyone is thinking alike, then no one is thinking. I would like to wind up the session with a small take-home thought. To think is easy, to act is difficult. To act as one thinks is the most difficult of all. With this thought, we end this session, but I request all the other participants to kindly join us at 2 o'clock. We have a session on teaching pedagogy and placement, which will be handled by Mr. Anthony F. Alexander. Kindly join back sharp at around 1:45 so that we can start the session on time at 2 o'clock. Thank you all for your kind participation. Thank you, ma'am, once again. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. All the very best. Thank you.
Thank you.